fiance with me, and they helped me get to the finish. So this is Oklahoma, a place you never want to go, ever.
Looks like Saskatchewan.
That little speck in the distance is me, and that road was, I think, 130 or 132 miles straight without a single break. And of course, because of the weather extremes in Oklahoma, there are these expansion joints every 100 yards. There's an expansion joint in the road, which is about an inch and a half. Doesn't sound like much, but when you're riding a bike, you get that big bump every 100 yards for 132 miles. It completely does your head in. The bike, if anyone is interested, those are carbon cosmic rear. That's about $1,500 for that wheel. The spinach is a cheaper one. It's about, you can probably get that for about $600 or $700. The bike itself, you could probably get that for around $12,000, $15,000 back in '99. You're going to pay that. If you're going to get that bike now, it probably cost you close to $20,000. And I had two of them because you had to have a backup bike. I had two support crew vehicles, a lead and a backup. So the lead, they were responsible for route finding. They were behind me all the way, checking the route book. The route book was about 150 pages long. It's 5,000 K. They have to check this route out months in advance. So the race across America for next year is already being planned right now. They have to check at the time stations. So there are 62 time stations where they have to check. I don't have to check. I didn't have to get off my bike, but my crew has to go to these time stations and say, yes, this is our cyclist going through. So they have to do that. They have to get food, water, drink. They have to motivate me. They have to make sure I don't fall asleep on my bike. And they have to monitor me when I start hallucinating. So everybody hallucinates during this race. So, for example, where was it? I think it was Mississippi. Again, another place you never want to go. So, things you do to pass the time, you do some crazy things. So, in Mississippi, it was counting dead armadillos. So there's a whole section of about 50 or 60 miles where thousands and thousands of, looked like lemmings. And then these armadillos, it appeared that had actually gone onto the road just to be killed. So there's just flattened armadillos for 50, 60 miles. So I was counting these dead armadillo carcasses, and then the gear change, my gear levers, which are here in the center of my bars, turned into this silver box. So I couldn't change gears, so I'm thinking, okay, well it's pretty flat now, so I can stay in this gear. But then it started getting into some rolling hills, and I was getting really upset because I couldn't change gears. And this is 2 o'clock in the morning after 3,000 miles on the bike, or 2,500 miles on the bike. So I called my crew over and I said, look, I can't change gears because this silver box is preventing me from changing gears. So they looked at me very strangely and decided it was time to take it early night that night. Another day, there were gravestones. That was another hallucination. Gravestones coming out of the ground, forcing me to do slalom. And I'm thinking, well, this is going to end up in tears sooner or later. So again, I called my crew and I said, look, you've got to do something about these gravestones because I'm going to crash into one of these gravestones soon. And again, they said, look, there are no gravestones there. It's just a hallucination. So yeah, it's a stressful. It was a stressful race, and when I crossed the line in Savannah on the 2nd of August, '99, that was my retirement. That was my retirement race. So I still race a little bit, but it's just indulgence races like Olympic distance races in Hawaii and Kauai and beautiful places like that. So after the race across America, I think 3 weeks after, I was flying over to Vancouver, Canada to start doing a postdoc. So I finished my PhD. Little check in the box. I mean, most people go out and get hammered and get wasted and celebrate. If you're an astronaut candidate, chances are you just put a check in the box. PhD, good, big deal. No big deal. What's the next thing to do? So the next thing was a postdoc. And that was at Simon Fraser University, the Environmental Physiology Unit at School of Kinesiology, and had to do some teaching. But what myself and Andrew Blaber developed was the extreme physiology program. So, because I prefer to do research in the field. You can do lots of valuable research in the lab, but when it comes to human performance, you really have to go out in the field and test people there. And it's not good doing that sort of research in the ivory white tower environment. So what we did, we decided we'll take a group of 4 people at Mount McKinley, because this aligned itself with the 7 Summits project that I have going. So I thought, okay, well, might as well get the university to pay for this. So got some money from the President's Fund and various other funds, recruited 2 people, Jen and, I can't remember his name now, it's 10 years ago. Anyway, that's on the right, that's my wife. She comes on these climbs and crazy adventures with me as well. And that's Talkeetna Ranger Station, where you have to go to get your climbing permit. And they show you all these hideous videos of people with amputated limbs and frostbite and all the bad things that can happen to you on Mount McKinley. So we went up Mount McKinley. This is Jen. She was a doctor. So she did some of the medical studies while we went up. And it was early in the season, in May, because we wanted to become the first people that millennium to get to the top of Mount McKinley. Thought that'd be pretty cool. But the problem in May, it's still very, very cold on Mount McKinley. The warmest morning we had was -35. That was the warmest. During the day, we'd get up to 35, 40 degrees Celsius because of all the heat reflected off the glacier and the snow. Got up to Windy Corner one day, and Mount McKinley is one of those few mountains in the world where you can be flash frozen to death. It can be that cold. There's an interesting book by Art Davidson called -148. If you want to read about just how cold mountains can get, then read that book. -148 was the wind chill when those guys went up in the winter. So it gets cold, and we found out just how cold when we went through Windy Corner on our second carry on the second day up to Basin Camp, which is at 4,400 meters. And in an instant, it went from being a pleasant -10, -15 to -60. And we were just paralyzed with the cold. In a whiteout, didn't know where we were. If it hadn't been for this Austrian guy with us, who had been injured, and we were helping up to the next camp. He knew, he had a better idea where we were, because we missed one of the ones, and if we'd gone in the direction I wanted to go, we'd have ended up in a crevasse field, which had been really bad. But all this time we spent trying to route find, we got frostbite. So we got 2nd degree frostbite on our fingers. And the thing with frostbite, if you refreeze the digit, and if you've got 2nd degree frostbite, the next step is amputation. So we didn't want to risk amputation. So we got up to 17,000 feet, we had to come back down. Big disappointment. Made up for it the next year. So we went up to Aconcagua, which is even higher. Not as spectacular as Mount McKinley, but it's a big mountain, 22,841 feet, or 6,962 meters in metric. So that's us on the top of Aconcagua, so that was one of the 7 summits done. We also did research on this as well, so this is part of the postdoc. And again, it's a good thing to put on your astronaut resume. There's no fixed set of qualifications that you need to be an astronaut, other than the key ones like pilot's license, scuba diving, PhD, master's degree. Those are the key ones. But you really want something that makes you stand out. Like one of my friends down in the States, who works in EVA. So he's the guy who crawls into the shuttle 2 days before launch and sorts out the EVA suits. Rolf Erdmann, he did his PhD with me. He speaks fluent Russian because his father was the translator for the American team in the Russian Olympics, and so he learned fluent Russian. So that makes him stand out. So when they start reviewing your applications, it's always good to have something that makes you stand out. They can say, okay, well that's the guy who did the base jump from El Capitan, or that's the guy who flew a fighter jet, or that's the guy who speaks fluent Russian, or that's the guy who does those crazy triathlons, whatever. It's something that makes you stand out. Mountaineering is a good one. There's more than a few astronauts who've climbed Everest. Parazinski was there, Scott Parazinski, 2 years ago. One of the guys who was in my group in astronaut training, he climbed Everest last year, Christian Otto. His brother became the youngest Canadian to climb it. So mountaineering is a pretty common one among astronauts and astronaut candidates. Other jobs, didn't get enough funding to sustain the extreme physiology program, so decided to go off and become a submariner. After doing all my training, they told me that there's an age limitation for submariners. So after learning to drive this thing, which is a lot of fun, it's a 5,000-ton frigate, I decided to leave the Navy. What I do now is do that job on the right. So I'm in charge of centrifuge operations for the Canadian Forces. So we have pilots that come in, operators strap them into the centrifuge, and we press a button, and off they go to 7.5 G. Sometimes they G-lock, that's gravity-induced loss of consciousness. Again, you can get a G-run, get a G run in, because that looks good on your resume as well. Not many places you can do that. You can go down to NASA, but it's pretty expensive.